All right. Now the next one is hazardous. What do you think that's referring to? Versus the last one that says impossible.
When there's a negative reaction from previous other traumatic issues that may have happened in the lifestyle or outside life.
That's for the hazardous you're talking, or impossible? Which one?
Yeah, hazardous.
Okay, and how would you distinguish that from impossible border crossing now?
Yeah, fine. What about you?
When, I guess impossible is when the relationship is done, like when they give up.
All right. So they.
Oh.
Everybody's with us still? Ashley, okay, right. Thanks, Ashley.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Welcome, Linton. I'm supposed to press it? Okay. All right. Your mics are off in St. Lucia.
Yes, it's on now.
Okay. All right then. Good. Thanks. Right. So very good. Smooth. Basically, what the students are learning and what they come to the table with. There is no cognitive dissonance. They are able to handle the information. They recognize that there's a difference, but usually these students, work hard. They really try to make it. They don't want to look as if they don't know what's going on, so they really try and work hard to at least pass the test just enough. They're not exceptional students, but they're working hard and they're making an effort to really, make sense of the science. Hazardous. These students, they have this conflict. Their cultural experiences might be that when we dispose of garbage, and for environmental point of view, I live in an area where garbage collection is very rare. So I have to put my garbage in, an area that is not what you call it now, not sanctioned to put it there. I put it in a gully, or I throw it in my neighbor's backyard. Just kidding. But the idea is that they've come into our science classroom. We're teaching them about respect for the environment, and we're saying that we must dispose of our garbage properly. It will reduce the risk of spreading diseases, etc., etc. But they might hear the scientific explanation, but their reality is, I can't do that. I have to throw my garbage in the gully, in the stream, in the river, somewhere down the road. So they have this imbalance and they can't resolve it because they don't have any other experience. And for such persons, they might, in giving an expression or in writing probably, or giving an explanation, you'll hear both things coming out. So it's as if they're justifying what you're saying in your science classroom, but also holding on to what they have. And sometimes that's where we get misconceptions coming out. Has anyone ever read a student paper where you see some of the science coming forward, but then you see another set of concepts that you can't figure out where is this coming from? Where did this confusion come from? Samuel, have you experienced it? Ava, have you experienced it since I know that you are active teachers right now and Linton?
Most of the time, what I do in the class is I will see how I can relate what I'm teaching to what they know already. Okay. So most of the time, I don't want to teach chemistry, but I will talk about boy and girl. So I'll find a way of relating it to what they know already. Okay. So sometimes it can be a challenge, but I will try everything to relate it to what they know already.
All right. Okay. All right. So
or even sometimes I have to take it to another subject before I come back to what I'm about to teach. So I'll say, okay, in maths, you know this, or in biology, you know about man and woman. Then I'll now relate it to chemicals, then go to elements and compound. So I always try to relate it to what they know already.
All right. But so far in the teaching, I understand that, and we should all do that. Always start from what the students know, prior knowledge. But is there anything that you are aware of Because the thing about this border crossing, it's really focusing mainly on the cultural impact, something in the students' socialization that somehow they can't seem to let go of. I don't know if you have seen that or experienced it with any of your topics at all. Even for agricultural science, it might be maybe more pronounced there or more obviously seen than in maybe chemistry or physics. I don't know. Can you share, Ava? Have you seen where students, based on maybe some practices that they have been taught, maybe from their grandparents or
Yes, yes,
passing on, and you're now
yes.
influencing? Okay, yes, sorry, go ahead.
I was listening to you. Yes, I'm just agreeing with what you said. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, so share an example, if you can recall any, where the students, for hazardous border crossing, we're looking at, where it seems as if they're holding on to some concepts from their cultural, orientation. They've heard what we're saying in your science classroom, but somehow they have this, twin them, or somehow a bit of the science and a bit of the unscience, for want of a better expression, is coming out in their answers or their responses.
I think you see that not a lot, but you see that sometimes, especially when the children themselves are involved in agriculture with their grandparents. You might have a grandmother, a grandfather who has a farm, and then they might say, "Miss, that's not the time to plant that seed because they have not seen the moon yet, the rain have not begun, and these kind of things." And he said, "Plant it at nights because something happens at that time, a particular time." Especially if they read, there's a book, I forget the name, a planner. I forget what's the name of the book. Something farming something. So it
Okay,
tells you at that particular time when there's a half moon, a full moon, or something. So
right.
they say that's not, you're not doing the right thing. My grandfather said that, and put the seeds deeper because whatever, whatever. So that it comes across. Um, and even though you try to explain that, no, we have a greenhouse, we'll have sprinklers, we have this or whatever, it's a bit difficult. But I do listen, and sometimes the information is useful. But to get them to believe, well, not to believe, but to get the factual thing of it, they still hold on to what their great grandparents told them. But I guess, you try your best.
Okay, that's thanks. But that is exactly what we're talking about, where they have these experiences, and even though you're coming with your scientific approach, it's very difficult to challenge them on those. And as Ashley said earlier, the impossible border crossing is really where they give up. They're saying, no, you know what, this is not for me. It is, they reject it, they essentially sign out of our classes. They're there, but they're not there. In certain areas, I'm not talking about generally in your entire biology class, although they might find, they might adopt that stance. But the truth is, when we're looking at these various types of border crossings, smooth, there's no conflict. They accept it, their real world, and your science teaching are compatible. As like Samuel, open-minded, they're willing to take on what is being taught them. Managed, they're not as proficient, but they're willing to work hard. They don't want to look foolish. They don't want to, they sometimes they even pretend. They even, what they call it, fake it until they make it, so to speak. But I don't know if you have had students who, as soon as you say something, they're repeating it right after to make it look as if they're really very smart. They know exactly what you're saying. Do you have students like that who echo? So if you say the planting will be done, you hear it will be done. I don't know if you've had that experience. Anybody?
Yes, yes.
Right, they wanted to make that they look okay. They know what's going on. Hazardous are the ones who tend to come with the misconceptions. Now remember, all this is just a theory being put forward by these researchers. They made these observations in students, and they decided that they will give us work to do as teachers, that we need to learn that as we watch our students going through in our classes, that these things are things we could look out for. So the hazardous tends to bring things in that are not really there, and then the impossible border crossing. We have an expression here in Jamaica: we cannot cross it. They just cannot allow them to cross it. No, these researchers didn't leave us high and dry. They came up with these types of border crossings, but they also decided to describe the learners that would be associated with each type of border crossing. So for the smooth, for the persons, as Jason says, that they don't have a problem, they connect immediately, they are referred to as potential scientists, the bright ones, the ones who succeed even if we aren't very good at what we're doing as teachers. Do you have students like that?
A few, yes, a few.
Right. Samuel, how about you?
Yes, yes, of course.
And we have the outsiders, I don't know.
Right. I hear Ava talking about the others.
Sorry,
School for the
sorry.
smart kids. Not necessarily the ones who are just scientists in their blood, as we would say, but they work hard. They really
No,
try to get
I guess you can ask him to print it for you, but I print my, you can bring it at work, you don't have a
I
thing?
can hear you as you speak. All
Sorry.
right, no problem. And hazardous, they never know. Sir, I don't know. I don't know. Miss, I don't know. I mean, I don't knows. I don't know if you're, well, I don't, I'm using the expression, I don't know. These students, when you ask them something, they're afraid. They're afraid to try. They're afraid that their answers are incorrect. They're uncertain. So it's easier for them to say, I don't know. What don't you understand? I don't know. I don't understand anything. But they're afraid to admit where they're having some conflict, some kind of, something is already in their schema, in their prior knowledge that's preventing them from accessing the information. And then the outsiders, that's not a good color font. That's not a good color on the purple, it's dazzling. So I need to change that outsiders. But the outsiders, as we said before, there is no connection. So one column, we're looking at the relationships. Smooth, border crossing, managed, border crossing, hazardous, and impossible. The types of learners that these researchers link to the different types of border crossing they have seen: potential scientists, the other smart kids, I don't know, and outsiders. Now, what these scientists went on to do was to try and figure out how can we explain this to make sense. Yes, we see it happening, but is there a factual way in which we can say, yes, this seems to be something that we can share with the world in terms of our research? We have a cognitive explanation to, a cognitive explanation for what is going on. And they came up with this concept called collateral learning. Anyone know what collateral learning is? Heard it before?
When you hold two different schemata, I think the paper uses, are like two different sets of information in your mind, about a subject, two conflicting sets of information, I guess.
Right. Anybody else? All right, let's see. All right. I picked this out from the same article. It wasn't there as clear as that, but I just, picked it out. It says constructing scientific concepts side by side and with varying degrees of interference and interaction with their indigenous concepts. So just as Jason said, you're holding these two, it says schema. I know as scientists, sometimes when we're reading information from the arts, we don't, sometimes that is challenging, but really it's just simply saying that if there is a scientific concept that is being taught in the classroom, that there might be a comparative concept that the students hold that can somehow influence how they view what you are teaching. And it's really talking about indigenous concepts. It's not talking about something where they can't understand in terms of mathematical formula, not like that. Or it's not talking about they don't understand that a word because of the science jargon. It's really being very specific. This what we're exploring today about border crossing is really zoning in on one factor, the cultural influences on how students learn in our science classroom. So as it says, collateral learning, it's really about how collateral, something by the side, we're teaching one thing, but here is a conflicting or something else, another concept that is within the schema, as Jason said, within the cultural makeup of our students that can possibly interfere or cause some kind of distortion to what is being taught. So that is collateral learning. And these persons, Aikenhead and Jagade, they say that they think that the ability for students to hold these concepts side by side varies. For these students to either assimilate, taking what is being taught and push aside what their own thing is, that's what explains these differences in the types of border crossing. So earlier on, when Vanessa mentioned how in her school, there was this total denial, for want of a better expression, of the cultural differences that existed. It must have been really very difficult for such students to even begin to connect with what was being taught in religious studies. It was religious studies, Vanessa?
Yes, it was.
Right. So it is like a suppression of what they were coming to the table. No opportunity for them to even express what was their own cultural experiences. I guess the school might have been afraid to explore that. But when we do that, we really shut down the learning experience. When we don't find out how their cultural differences can impact our teaching and learning of science, we shut down the communication. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So, I'm trying to find myself here now. These were the types of collateral learning that they came up with. Don't worry, you won't be tested to say what is parallel, what is collateral, whatever. We want you to just appreciate this concept. What we want to take away from today's class, because I know there's a lot of new words and new expressions. Don't try and commit them. I just want you to appreciate what is this thing called border crossing? How do we explain it? And then say, okay, if this happens in my classroom, how can I, as a teacher, pay attention to it? How can I, as a teacher, address it? So at the end of this kind of very theoretical discussion is a very practical outcome. The practical outcome is, as teachers, we want to appreciate this thing called border crossing. I have my students in my classroom. I have the really bright ones. They go home, they don't have a problem, they read, they understand, and I wish the whole class was like that. But then I have these other students where no matter what I tell them, they're just not changing their view. No matter how we go through, they're not accepting it. Those are the students who, are at risk, really. And as Ashley said, they will just give up. So, types of collateral learning. Parallel. This type of collateral learning, basically the students switch on and switch off. So they're in your classroom and they don't have a problem. Yes, miss, yes, sir, I understand, I agree, and they can explain, write the essays. They can go home and their cultural experiences are back at the front again. They will continue doing what they used to. They can hold the two somehow without any major conflict. So in your classroom, they are just, as Samuel said, open-minded. He learned it, got his A's, I assume, right, Mr. Samuel? But then, such students who exhibit parallel learning, collateral learning, they can go home and they're back to norm. So you can be teaching about energy conservation, turn off the lights, do not keep, or just conservation generally. Turn off the taps, don't take long showers, take 5-minute baths, use a bucket to wash your pet. They get that, and they will repeat it, they have it all, but guess what? Don't really have no meaning when they go back home. So the lights are on, they fall asleep with the TV, the fridge is open, they're doing back to the sleep, but they know the science. So that's parallel collateral learning. Compartmentalizing, to a more schema depending on the given context. So context number one, your science classroom. Context number two, what happens at home. They don't have a problem. They can go back and forth. And so you can see the fact that I say they don't have a problem, they go back and forth. They're not changing what they think, but it doesn't prevent them from learning what you are teaching them. Then you can imagine what kind of border crossing would this type of collateral learning be associated with?
Probably manageable. I don't know.
But
Outside.
Managed?
they don't have a problem at all.
Outsider.
Smooth.
Right?
Outsider.
I agree. Smooth or managed, either one. Because the truth is that they're getting on with the science, they have learned it. Whether they apply it is another thing, but they've learned the science. And they've demonstrated to you in their tests, in their expressions in the classroom, in their responses, that they get it. They don't keep asking other questions, or they don't bring in their own ideas that seems to resist what it is that you're trying to teach them or show them. Simultaneous.
Can I ask a question,
Sure.
please?
Thank you.
Okay. You said the children have learned, let's say we said the type of crossing that will be managed. But if you have learned something, don't you, aren't you supposed to have a change in behavior? Or you just accept? Because to me, in order for you to be educated or to have learned something, you probably, I'm thinking, to put it in action. But they just know it, to repeat it. But if you have learned, and that's a better thing to do, unless your situation don't allow for you to actually be practical to carry out, as you said, the garbage and do it environmentally friendly, etc., etc. But just passing the test, have they learned? Can we say they have learned, or they just know the content? Because I'm thinking that they would be able to go home and do what they've learned because they have understood the reason why we do it. We turn up the lights because we want to save energy, we want to do that, we want to save bill, we want to do something else. But can we say they have learned if they have not put into practice what you have taught them?
Well, let's hear from your peers. What do you say in Bermuda, Dominica? What do you think? Learn or just learn? Is learning just that they can pass their exams, go on to do the CSEC, move on to the tertiary level? Or are we looking for a change in how they're thinking and how they approach whatever, concepts that they have?
Both.
In an ideal world, we'd like to change the way that they behave.
Yeah.
In reality, you probably have to accept that you can just get them through their exams.
What do you say, Samuel? Thank you very much.
Yeah. What came to my mind is more like open them to the real world and like to let them know, if I want to become this when I grow up, you need to know about this. So like getting them to be aware of what they want to become and what it will take them to get there. So like open them to, yes, okay, you want to become a doctor? These are what you need to know before you can get there.
So, sorry, I didn't get the last part of that.
I said it's more like open them to the real world of what it will take to get them to what they need to know to get to where they want to go to get to in life.
So, remember Ava is saying change in behavior. So you're saying that you don't think that at this level that we should expect changes in like if we teach something, if it has something impacting for life, not everything does necessarily, but do you think that, as Ava is saying, that we should be expecting that kind of change in behavior, just acquisition of knowledge to move on?
Yes. To me, because there's some concepts you'll be telling them that they don't know before. So for sure, there should be a change in some of their cultural experience, because of what you're teaching them is new to them, and from the process, it should affect their attitude to some of the things they knew before and what they are getting to know.
Yes, Ava.
Can I say something?
Sure.
You know, if we were to, for me, sometimes I go to the classroom and I give the children my work plan without the resources, without the whatever else. So they have the list of topics and they have what week, etc. We're going to be doing what. So I'm thinking if we give the children that, you know, they can Google, they can use the computer, they can get whatever. They don't really, I think, need us in the classroom per se. I'm not sure if you get it because once they reach a certain level of reading, they have the reading skills. They can go if they're interested and get what is agriculture, get what is soils. You have videos, you have YouTube, you have everything. Even some knowledge that we ourselves as teachers don't have, the children are way ahead of us. I know sometimes we don't give them credit for that, but I'm saying as a teacher sometimes we need to yes, exam prove that you're bright maybe on paper, but if our children don't acquire thinking skills and the basic skills, the life skills that they need, what is our purpose in the classroom? Because they can learn. I can go and give my 9-year-old daughter something and go and look on agriculture. She can get it. She gets the video. She does her homework. I just check it or whatever. My 4-year old, I give her to find something. She knows how to get the videos on one song. She can get the rest, and she knows it. You know, I'm saying, but children have the ability. They learn faster than us as adults. So I'm thinking, as a teacher, and maybe just morals, as ethics, you would want to see a change in your children's behavior, and not necessarily always academic. Yes, they want to go into higher learning these things, but they still need to have certain values and have certain things that we want to see them move. And the paper tests don't always prove that our children are learning what we have learned, because you have other ways you can question them, you can ask them, and the same child that you think might not be able to do it, they'll tell you something. Because I myself, I learn from my students all the time, and I said, okay, I didn't know that. You know, I'm thinking that as teachers, we should aim to actually have a change in the child's behavior and not always academic and say, yes, they passed our test, so we have taught. Because give the child that maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, they don't know what, they don't know, they don't remember, but they remember something for life. I think that that's what we aim to get. Just my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva. You sound very passionate on that one. And to be honest, I think we'd all agree with you. And I think Ashley used the term in an ideal world. In other words, that's what we want. And I think as much as possible, we should accommodate that. And even the fact that we're talking about this thing called border crossing is to kind of address that, because we don't want them to just learn content. As you correctly said, Eva, they can Google, they can YouTube, as we say in Jamaica, YouTube. We can do, you know, they have access to information. But as Samuel also said, he said, he used an expression, he used a futuristic expression. He said, they should be able to. We're equipping them, we're providing them with, or exposing them with, as he rightly said, with the basic information for them to act on. We can't really be held responsible whether or not they act on it. But I agree with you, Eva. That should be the real test, so to speak, to determine, having acquired this, having been exposed to this, having practiced this, can you now take it to the step of implementation? And maybe some subjects or some concepts or some parts of our syllabuses can allow for that more than others. And when it does, we should really shoot for it. You know what I mean by shoot for it? We should really promote those. We should really, you know, spend time trying to get students to activate their knowledge, so to speak. So I agree with you, Ava. Definitely the ultimate test for learning is not just simply acquiring content or information, but it's the use of it, how they apply it. But this concept that these researchers have come about is just simply saying how students can sometimes resist. They never reach the part of applying. It's either they're even saying, yes, they understand this concept, and then for those who might have a difficulty in understanding, not because of anything else, we're just looking at one thing, the effect or the impact of their cultural deposits. Something at home, something in their schema already that might allow them to understand or allow them not to. So I take your point, Eva. that really we should be going beyond just content. All right, anybody else wanted to say, add anything to that before we move on? All right, let's go before I get the timeout halfway mark. So let's go. Simultaneous learning. It's almost as if the light bulb comes on. In simultaneous learning, basically, it's like one schema brings light in another schema. And I think they had an example in the article. But essentially, you taught your students something. They go home and somehow doing something else at home, suddenly they remember what was taught in the classes, and therefore the collateral learning now allows them to kind of move from one to the next. So when it says simultaneous, at the same time, is that learning one thing brings elucidation or somehow explains something for them in their home environment or the other setting. But dependent, one is dependent on the other. Basically, it's like they twin the two of them. They've come up with a synergy, an amalgamation, as they would say, of the two. The two schema. What they know from their cultural practices, that, as you said, Eva, that they must plant at a certain time, and then you teach them something else. And so they twin the two of them and say, okay, I'm going to do this and do this. So that's really applying what they have learned, but coming up with a new schema, so to speak. And finally, secured collateral learning. This person has the ability to really identify what is similar and what is different between the two worlds, their scientific world and as well as their cultural experiences. And such persons identifying similarities and differences can accommodate the two schema and can therefore work out, okay, this is where it's similar, this is where it's different. These things I accept, these things I might not accept, but they are a little bit more accepting usually of the information. They're not rejecting it. So in these types of collateral learning, they say, these scientists, Jagade and Aikenhead, they think can somehow help to explain what's going on in our students. But that's what they say. What do you say? What do you think about this mumbo jumbo so far?
It's relative.
Explain that one for me now.
So can you explain what you want us to explain about the mumbo jumbo?
No, what do you mean by relative?
What we think about the mumbo jumbo?
Right. Yes.
I guess it just helps us to put everything that we're taking into some list or category of what's going on, maybe as we oversee our students in the classroom or the environment, so that we can have better understanding of what might be going through their head as we're explaining a theory and their face lights up, maybe because they have a parallel simultaneous experience.
Okay, right.
And that might trigger us to go in and ask, what are you smiling about, Jimmy? And then Jimmy might say that he understands and related to something that he learned from his father last night.
Right. And that's a good point, because do you find we have this challenge? Ava, Samuel, and Kamisha were always talking about it, and that we have this challenge. We have a syllabus. We have time. We have a time in which we need to teach a syllabus. So question, do you think that there are times when students have schema, especially the cultural practices? I'm not talking about misconceptions due to they thought that respiration was breathing or breathing was respiration. I'm not talking about something like that. I'm talking about now something in their cultural socialization. Do you find that students want to express this, but sometimes we as teachers, we kind of close the door because we want to get on with what we want to teach?
Definitely. I believe that happens in a lot of circumstances, because there's maybe one teacher to 20 kids, and so the teacher.
They got 1 to 40.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. Even more of a time restraint. You
Right.
know, not enough time to listen to everybody's
I know.
understanding or misunderstanding. So yeah, it becomes difficult.
Yes, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. And the worksheets that were sent ahead to you, one of them was really just showing you how you can try and find out you can create your own depending on your topic and what might affect their learning. But there's a worksheet that I think tells you, see if we can just quickly turn to it. Do you have your worksheets? There was one that says read the story
Yes.
below and tick to show whether you strongly agree, don't know that. You know which one I'm talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So this was just an example that they say teachers can use. Let's allow persons to find it. Right. So let's say a teacher, you have taught a topic, but you want to determine to what extent have they accepted the scientific worldview on the topic, or to what extent have they held on to their own view. You can create your own scenarios, but this was just a worksheet to say how you can find out what has been happening with your students. So just as Ashley said, we really don't have time to investigate everybody's experience. Some might be shared experiences, but some might be really very unique. So what they were suggesting in this worksheet is just a way in which you can come up with your own questions depending on the topic that you are teaching and kind of find out what's going on with your students. An assessment tool. So for example, it says during a thunderstorm, Mr. Him, a well-known witch doctor, went out of his house holding his metal spear, pointing it in all directions. He was suddenly struck by lightning. And they say, people say that, and they give these different scenarios. Qualified traditional doctor, he was bewitched, his spear conducted charges through him. What do you say? No, it's a way to find out, knowing the cultural background of how, in this particular, wherever this question was set, that when it comes to things like lightning and thunder, things of nature, this superstitious um, the superstitious strength it outweighs, so to speak, the scientific knowledge. This was just a way to find out, do they accept C, that because of the lightning and the movement of electrical charges in the air, that the lightning rod or the metal was able to conduct these charges because it's a good conductor of electricity, etc., etc. They put these scenarios there just to find out, is the student does the student still accept what they have already known in their schema, or do they know, accept? It's just a way of finding out what's going on, because what Ashley said was very important, that we can't go around exploring everybody's cultural background and how it impacts learning, but you can do an assessment tool, and from asking, setting up your questions, you can find out, the temperature, so to speak, of your class, and find out if you need to do maybe another intervention, or maybe some reinforcement, etc., based on how they respond to that question. What do you say? What do you think of that? Let's read through just some of them. As I said, it's all about the impact of culture on what the teaching and learning of science. So these questions might not be relevant for us, but the point is just a tool, the idea of using this as a tool.
It seems like a good idea to me.
I find like a lot of the stuff that you're saying, it makes such common sense when you're saying it, but I don't know that I would ever come up with stuff like this. Like if I was like teaching in Bermuda, like how would I figure out the culture of the students in my class? Like,
right. But you know your country. I understand what you're saying. There are certain topics that will lend itself to this possibility. Are you still seeing the screen?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. There are certain topics that, from your experience as teachers, you know you always have this, there are certain things that tend to come up based on how students think, how they're being socialized, etc. You kind of know the hotspots. Ava, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right, some topics you know that every year students have a difficulty because of something in their background. So based on that, Tracy, that just knowing that there are certain topics, I'm not saying it's everything, remember, we're looking at the cultural influence on what we're teaching as science teachers. So if you know that, for example, in reproduction, oh Lord, sexual reproduction in animals, in man, there is a plethora of wild myths out there, but students come to your classroom with them. You're armed with your scientific knowledge. If you know ahead that every year, or based on what students have comments and what they say, that they will always have this conflict of accepting what you're saying based on what they do, the practices of their peers, what they see other people do, what people say, you can design something kind of similar. If you just keep it simple, but just targeting those areas. So we're not talking about going through our entire syllabus and trying to find out at what point this cultural practice is going to interfere. Not necessarily. There are some that are just more, what do you call it now, more open. they're target areas that we need to be aware of. Samuel, can you think of any topic in your chemistry, physics that, based on your experience so far, you find that in your country, students will come with something from what happens in the nation that might interfere with that particular component of the topic?
Okay, what came to mind now is I can remember when I was talking about static electricity, that's where lightning comes. Like I was trying to explain lightning, how cloud moving, and there's a what we call friction going between clouds, and in the process creating charge. Like they find out, like, you serious that when cloud moves, there's a charge being created? I say yes, of course, because like that's first time they hearing that. So like when I was trying to explain lightning to them, like wow, almost everything I said was new to them. Because I was telling them when the cloud moving, there's a charge created, one is positive and negative, one will be attracting everything on the ground and all that. It was new to them.
Right.
But like most of the time is I have this kind of notion that when students come to my class, most of the concept will be new to them, because they're coming from the lower section of the school to the upper section of the school. And most of the times, like, oh God, like, wow, first time they're hearing that, or they don't know about that. So it's something like I'm always expected in my class.
You're always expecting some cultural impact in your class.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask him a question about that?
Go right ahead.
Well, okay, Samuel, so you're saying that when you're presenting this information about lightning, it's new to the students, but...
Yes, of course. Like the process involved in it, like the cloud, when they move, they rub each other to create these charges. Like, wow,
right.
Like that's new to them.
Right, so how did they think lightning came about? You know what I mean? Like, what was their idea then that they had before you explained it to them? Do you know?
I guess they think more of like a supernatural event taking place.
Okay.
That is beyond human expression. That like, wow, that is just happening. So like now using science terms to explain lightning is new to them. They felt like something from the creator is just happening and that is it. So when I was trying to explain the process that takes place at each stage, they were surprised about that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Where yes, it's new, and a student can either accept what you're saying, Samuel, or reject it. You agree?
Yes, of course.
Right. And that's the challenge that we have when students come with very strong cultural thoughts. I mean, one of the famous expressions in my biology classes, when I ask, why do you think, for example, that the left side of the heart has a thicker wall than the right side of the heart? The famous response is because God made it so. No, I would say to them, yes, God made it so, but why did it make it so? Why is it? I said that he didn't just make it so willy-nilly. He had a design. He had a plan. There's something behind it. But you're correct that there are times when they come in, they think things are so mysterious. It's beyond explanation. So when we attempt to explain how, these plants bloom at night, and that the flower is created, and how there's pollination, etc., etc., they think that this phenomenon, and as you said, depending on their background, where they're from, this phenomenon can't be explained away like that. That's not right. It's a mystery. It's something magical. It's something supernatural. It's something out of the science world can't touch that. And for some persons, I don't think in our own countries that might be a big problem, but in certain areas it can be, depending on the extent to which the phenomenon occurs. All right, but thank you very much for sharing that, Samuel. I'm glad I picked on you again.
Welcome.
Okay. All right. Now, I had sent as well, I think, so back to the worksheet. And we got onto that argument from Tracy. So Tracy, you were saying that just looking at it, it looks good, it sounds good, but you're not quite sure if you could create something. I understand. I don't even think I could too, unless I wrap my head around and look at something. It's like a multiple choice, if you notice. Targeting the specific areas where there might be that conflict. So even in Samuel's case, he could write something, given these scenarios, 3-4 scenarios, saying lightning is caused by a spirit. Lightning is caused by, something, and you keep going. And in there, in your choices, you have the scientific view, just to test to see, are the students still holding on to their view? How does that, in light of what just Samuel just shared, Tracy, how do you feel about that? Do you think that could be doable?
I would have to wrap my head around it a bit more, because I think for me, I'm just thinking that the students in Bermuda have the same culture as me, and I wouldn't even have thought that they believed that lightning was from a god, or or from some mythical character. Like,
Right.
I'm gonna have to wrap my head around
Right.
a way to figure out where they're coming from, I guess, a bit better.
Right. But remember, Samuel is talking about his context. So you would have to find, if Bermuda has no myths, there are no mythical stories in Bermuda.
I don't think they're that strong. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say not. I think it would be not really.
It's not like you're talking
much,
in these questions and stuff. I mean, the big myth that other people have about us is the Bermuda Triangle, but no one here believes that, or
That explains
that's something to laugh at if you're a student in Bermuda.
I was trying to think about one. I was thinking, I've heard like it said that if you kill a spider, it makes it rain. I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but I think when I was a kid, but I don't know how much people really would believe it. They might just say it like a saying, like, oh, somebody killed a spider, but I don't think people really believe that that's where rain comes from.
Interesting.
Our culture's different. I don't know.
It's very westernized. That's
Okay.
like people don't really believe in like obia and stuff. We don't really have, I don't think, like generally that people really put a lot of stock in that or myths. Yeah, I don't think we have. Yeah.
Okay, what about what ethnic groups live in Bermuda?
What?
Sorry, what
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So.
What ethnic groups live in Bermuda? I mean, I don't know, what's the composition of your island in terms of, of your nation, of who lives there?
I think it's like, is it
60%
Black?
African descent, 30% Anglo descent, 10% other, which would include, I guess,
Portuguese, Filipino.
yeah, Portuguese, Filipino, Indian, East Indian, Chinese, probably some South Americans, Latinos, stuff like that.
Okay. Saint Lucia and Dominica, just allow me to explore something with our Bermudan peers, because this is going to have an
Okay.
impact on the tasks that they have to do, that you all have to do from next week, because this course assumes that in the Caribbean region, this phenomenon exists, border crossing, where students have these cultural differences, and when they enter into our classroom, into the science classroom, for some topics, there might be a conflict. So the question, if you're now saying that really as a nation, you might be more westernized than other Caribbean countries, because of your makeup.
Right.
The 60% Africans that are there, they were born there, or they, yeah.
Well, probably from the Caribbean, I think, actually, originally, like from other Caribbean islands, but brought here, yeah.
They generations
First,
ago,
second generations.
Yeah, basically, I would say like 80% of the population is third generation. And it's because it's so small, I think our.
We also have quite a big difference that we don't have town or city versus rural areas. We're pretty homogenous the whole way across the
A
planet.
cosmopolitan.
Sorry?
One big cosmopolitan.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's no specifically rural areas versus built up. It's all spread across the whole island fairly evenly.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. I'm going to have to wrap my head around that now, as Tracy said earlier. I'm going to have to wrap my head around how I can assist, because there is going to be a need for you to be able to infuse. In other words, what we're talking about might not making any connection with you, because the idea of a strong cultural influence doesn't really exist. So the cultural influence, I'm thinking, therefore, would probably have to come from, I didn't want necessarily to go there, but it might be, as Vanessa was saying earlier, it either has to be the ethnic differences or religious differences that might somehow influence how students view science. I don't know. I'm throwing that out. Help me.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I guess the topic that I was thinking about would be like global warming, and like a lot of Christians don't really believe that that's happening because of certain biblical beliefs. So that could be a conflict. That's something I was thinking about.
I've come across it teaching evolution.
Or yeah,
I've had students who absolutely refuse to believe in evolution, that God put dinosaur bones there to trick evil scientists, and I've heard all sorts of things from students who have very, very strong religious beliefs. But it's kind of, okay, well, this is what you need to put for the exam. You believe what you need to believe, but this is what they want to hear.
Okay. All right. So that's another point. Thank you both for making those contributions. What about you, Ashley? Is there anything because it's something that you have to think about, because we want at the end of this class to be able to go away and think about how can culture in some way impact some lesson, so that I can create a lesson plan based on what we're equipped with, by the time the class is ended today.
I have to create a lesson plan based around some issue, right, to make it an effective lesson.
Right. In other words, some you can choose any topic, anything at all, but the real component of it would be how the teaching of that topic might be influenced by some cultural practice or some cultural or some philosophy that students can contend or hold, that might somehow be a conflict or something you have to address in your class. So it's something.
Yeah, I have to think about something good.
Yeah, right.
Share.
All All right, thank you very much. I mean, that was an eye-opener. I certainly learned from that discussion there. That was, I really appreciate that, because I didn't know, but it explained something to me, and towards the end of the class, you'll see what it is that it explained to me. I won't let the cat out of the bag just yet. All right. Now, you have been sent this worksheet. Let me see if I can get it a little bigger. Anybody remember seeing this?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right, this should bring us up. It's just a little exercise to try and bring out what we have been talking about. So you have been given different examples of border crossing, and based on the discussions that follow, in terms of, there's a conversation that follows. We want to be able to see if we can identify what type of border crossing is really going on. So for example, this one, border crossing example 1. Every one of them have, I think, the same opening line, but we kind of just mix it up a bit. So it says 2 stories based on prevalent traditional beliefs were narrated to rural school students by the researcher, at the end of which questions were asked that gave the students the opportunity to express their views freely. One story deals with a man who had an inefficient electric saw. The students tried to explain the phenomenon using a scientific viewpoint based on what they had learned in the science classrooms. They tried to explain the incident using the concept of efficiency, which compares useful work, and the physicist among our midst, Samuel, will get this one right away. Work put in over time. Efficiency can also be expressed in terms of the useful energy output, energy input, and the power output and power input. Then it goes on to say, however, some of them believed that evil spirits affected the saw, while others thought otherwise. And then they show, this is a real research, And then now, they gave us a little bit of the narrative. And we want to know, reading this, can we say what kind of border crossing we think that these students who believed in it were experiencing? So it says, Saifo, I guess is a student, says, I think it's because of ancestors, because Mr. NG, traditional medicine, his ancestors' medicine, because they think it can work over distance. Temba, how can they work like that? Saifo says they work because they're spirits. Duh, they're all over. That's me, I'm just adding that. Temba then says, can you use evil spirits to something which is a metal? And then Saifo says, not exactly on that chainsaw, but they affected the man, Mr. NG, one that used the saw. It might be that Mr. NG didn't put the fuels because the evil spirits were working within it. Okay. Now, sounds bizarre, but this happened. It was really asking them, what do you think happened with an inefficient electric saw? And the scientific views that were being drawn out were things about efficiency, work, and power. They were to explain using that. They were taught that, and here it is that they were given this question, explain why do you think that the saw was inefficient, blah, blah, blah. And this was the response of, the student Saifo. What kind of border crossing do you think is going on?
Manage?
How did he manage? Did he come up with the expected scientific worldview?
Well, I'd say hazardous or impossible.
I go with hazardous.
And okay, so let's do a quick review. Remember, smooth, no problem, they get it. Managed, they're really trying to explain, trying to get the concepts. They might not be as brilliant as others, but there's some evidence of the scientific concepts coming through. Hazardous, they have part of the scientific concepts, but they have some concepts that are just way out. And then impossible, they have not seen the light of day.
I changed mine impossible.
I changed mine to hazardous.
Well,
We both went young.
I only said hazardous because he did say that he didn't put fuel in. So he's aware that the fuel was involved in there somewhere. It wasn't the spirits working on the metal.
Okay. But somehow he thought that the spirits were working on the man.
Yes.
Fueling. All right. But was the fuel something that they were expected to explain based on a scientific viewpoint above? Above it spoke about, help me here, Samuel. It says work put in over the length of time, energy output, energy input, power, useful power. Let me just highlight where I'm reading. Useful power, total input. Where in this, Samuel, would fuel have been, somehow been a relevant point to me?
Okay, yeah. What comes to mind is to find the efficiency of any instrument you are using. Like written in what you just read is the power output divided by the power input. Now, to find the power itself, then we're thinking of the energy or the voltage and current, which is not really mentioned. Because it's an electrical saw, then we need to know the voltage and the current, because that will affect. Oh, but wow, that's confusing. Because I'm seeing electrical saw and fuel. Because if it's electrical saw, then fuel has nothing to do with it. That means using electricity.
Very good. So it means then, if it's an electric saw, this student who is talking about fuels and evil spirits, I would like to see that the student is experiencing an impossible border crossing, because they have not
Yes.
accepted. They have held on to this concept that something isn't working. Remember it said it was rural students. Something isn't working. Something is preventing it from working. And despite the intervention of the teacher prior to this moment of teaching about efficiency and power and all those things that you just spoke about, Samuel, they are not accepting it. They're holding on to this thing that it must be evil spirits. And yes, this looks way out, and it sounds over the top. But listen, it came from a study in 2004, and it says it's in South Africa. But the point is that is their reality. That's the students' reality. That's their cultural influence. That here it is. They have not yet been able to hold this concept about energy and efficiency of tools, etc., etc. Everybody following so far? That's how we're working it. So you have to look at this, what is given in this scenario, and then look at the conversations to try and determine what kind of border crossing. So we went through that one. Go through the next one in your groups. So Bermuda, you have your large number for Samuel. I don't know if you want to join with. That sounds funny. I don't know if you want to join with Linton and Ava on this one. I don't know if you want to have a little discussion. So across the mics, that's okay, no problem. Since Bermuda will be working within their group. So let's spend around 5 minutes on this one. If you don't have your paper, can you read the screen okay?
Yes.
All right, okay. So let's spend 5 minutes on that. So Samuel, I'm asking you to join Linton and Ava.
Okay.
All right.
Excuse me, what example are we dealing with now?
2.
Okay.
Example number 2.
Impossible.
They're managed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
They're clearly putting the effort in, but I don't know if they're just not explaining it very well.
You mean in the example?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The smooth is
It's
very smart.
managed. It's managed because they're
Rather smart students.
yeah,
They're trying to figure it out scientifically,
but it's not like
like distance, measuring,
it's not something that's coming naturally to them.
right? They haven't found the exact.
They realize that physics isn't the next thing.
Studying in high school, you got the wrong answer, you got the border race was already ahead. She had good aim.
Okay, well, you went to all the wrong schools. I'm like a city boarding at school.
She was great. I don't go to school. She always got cheap. Never mind the curriculum, this is what we're doing.
Okay.
You will never be standing on the road having to wait for the back.
Oh, I'd rather do that, thanks.
Well, are you able to communicate with Ava and Linton?
They have the scientific method at the moment, right?
So some did.
To manage their.
They're
When they do this,
they're not believing that the evil spirits made it fall.
is there a way where two sides can communicate? I'm still asking that question. What do you mean? Sorry. Two sides can communicate. Power means that we won't hear. I have to create something like a chat room or maybe on Zoom.
Does smooth mean that they have to understand the concept completely? Because maybe they could be using the science, but they just don't understand it completely. Whereas, like manage,
Well, Smooth
Would be some
explained
evidence
as a
of-
potential scientist, so
right?
whereas not whatever.
But it's easy for them to relate to, but maybe it's not easy for them to do necessarily. I don't know, because like this doesn't show any evidence of completely. It just seems like maybe they don't completely understand the concept, but it doesn't show that they believe that or spirit or anything.
So you're
Like
saying,
maybe cultural.
you're saying
I'm
it's
just
smooth?
asking. Oh yeah.
Well, I guess that, okay, for it to be manageable, or transitions to manageable cultures are somewhat different. So they're not really explaining anything. They're not really going against any cultural differences,
That's what I was saying.
right? So maybe it's
Yeah.
that was sneaky.
Yeah.
Well, no, what's if you read on to the next
Actually,
one,
if you
they're
look at
actually-
the science in here, it's actually correct. You say that the pivot, because if she's too close to the river, like if you have to push it over, you have to hold it at the end. So she's saying
But
that
she
she's
starts out
gonna-
by saying, let's say that she held the wheelbarrow closer to the equilibrium.
But if you figure it out, then it is heavier to move. So the science is right.
I'm gonna ask
Learning's not
have
right.
the story.
So that
What they call it, what they basically.
who controls them now?
I think the science is.
It is.
That's what I was thinking.
I think the science is.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to ask Bermuda to just, your peers in Bermuda to just mute your mic just for the next 2 minutes so that Samuel and Ava and Linton can just have a quick cross discussion.
Yes, Samuel.
Right. So have you been having dialogue with Ava and Linton?
Yeah, right. Okay.
No.
Yes, Samuel. What do you consider?
What I read from that is they understood exactly what they're saying. Because like that's the topic in physics. It's about moment of a force, where the force you apply is very important. It will affect from the distance where the pivot is located. And everything they said there is just, I'm telling you, that just smooth border crossing. They understood what they said, and everything they said there makes sense to me. Because one, talk about energy. The energy you apply affects, and the distance from where the energy is applied, the efforts have an effect. Exactly. When it's short, you have to apply more energy to it. And she was playing sport before, so she has little energy to apply, which made her to fall. So that is what we call, from what I can understand, that there's a
Breaking up.
application
You're breaking up.
of what they learned in school. Yes.
Say that again. Say that again. Say that last statement again. The last sentence.
I said from what I read that they could be able to transfer everything, the concept of moment of a force to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right,
that is smooth border crossing.
Okay. Well, we are sharing the same sentiments.
Okay.
Okay. All
All
right. I will go with that.
I'm having a border crossing right now.
Bermuda can unmute. You can hear me? Okay. All right, so let's come together now. For the one discussion.
Okay.
All right. Yes. All right. So, talk about analysis here now. So this story is about a girl who fell while pushing a wheelbarrow containing water containers.
Yes.
Some of the students were able to explain the situation using the principle of moments. Clockwise moment equal anti-clockwise moment. They had to realize the position at which the young girl, Zandil, Dial, whatever, held the wheelbarrow, and that it had a great effect on the way she pushed the water home. Some brought up the concepts of energy and power. The discussions now, so up here we kind of get in what the scientific view should be about, right? That's what I'm gathering. That up here is that's what we're looking for. As the students have their discussion, we're getting an insight on how they think. So, what does the principle of moment say? It says, and they talk about an equilibrium, sum of forces, they're equal. They said that she held the wheelbarrow closer to the equilibrium, so it was heavy. Then she used more energy when going than she did. When going than the work she did, anyway. She used more energy than she was supposed to use. That's one theory. Then she ran, which meant she used more energy. She could have run out of energy. Then energy consumed playing netball was another.
Yes.
Situation. And then using the wheelbarrow in the water was in the wrong position. And they talk about the pivots. So in order for her to push that. All right. So what kind of border crossing do you think is going on, and bring some kind of justification to your answer? So I kind of got a bit of Samuel's view, but let me hear Bermuda. What kind of border crossing, if you're able to figure it out in terms of the physics and stuff, and then why do you say that?
We said that it was smooth because they seem to be utilizing the physics concepts correctly. And there's no evidence of any, we were thinking it could be managed too, but then there's no evidence of any conflicting cultural beliefs. They only show examples of physics. Actually, I have a question about that, related to that, but I don't know, what do you think about that answer first, I guess?
Okay, Ava, what do you say?
Pardon?
Ava, right, Jason.
I'll pass on that one for now.
Oh, really?
Really?
Linton, you agree with what Jason said?
Yeah, I am very, I'm agreeing, yes. Because yes, it is explain the laws of moments. Yes, of course, it shows the law where it goes anti-clockwise and also clockwise.
All right.
Right.
All right, Samuel, I heard you as well when you were having your
Discussion.
Does anybody have any problem with this thing about you can say much energy was consumed when she was playing netball at school?
What's the question?
Where do you think that's coming from? And does it have an impact? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Who's gonna do like
I would have thought that could be relevant though, because if she played netball at school all day, she could be really tired. It would make it harder for her to lift the wheelbarrow.
Okay. Alrighty. If you were a teacher, maybe that might have been in this scenario. If you were a teacher, would you expect that to be included in the explanation, or would you want them to stick just the use of moments and how she held the barrel?
Well, no, I guess.
Yeah, you don't want to know about the netball things.
Yeah, it's probably not related to.
Right. So you get what I'm saying? Even though, as Jason accurately said, it doesn't really seem to be a cultural thing, but to bring something else in about playing netball at school, even though I heard Samuel saying, boy, it really would have an impact. She would not be as, but that's an assumption, right? So students do that all the time too. But I agree with you, Jason. Doesn't seem to be a cultural, coming from a cultural, except for to say that, boy, when we play, we're going to get tired and we don't have enough energy, you know.
Right.
But technically speaking, it doesn't seem to be a cultural conflict, and they seem to use the science more than anything else. So I would agree with you. It seems as if they had a better understanding of what was going on. It could be managed if you want to consider the netball, or it could be smooth because they were exploring the right scientific concepts about moments and how close, you know, the distance is from the pivot, etc., etc. All right. But you had a question, Jason, before we go to the break. What were you?
Yeah, I was going to ask, so like, say for example, the students use scientific concepts in their explanation, but they don't get it right. Like maybe they're having difficulties with the concepts, but could that still be smooth if it's not because of cultural conflict? Like maybe these concepts are just very complicated?
Right. So you're correct. So remember, for border crossing, we're just focusing on the impact of culture, not talking about scientific jargon or not being able to understand through definitions or meanings and stuff. So we're just looking at culturally, how people think culturally, our cultural biases. But you're correct. Obviously, they can be expressing themselves, but something at the end, or you can see that something is missing, a wrong concept. But if it's not a cultural bias, then I agree with you. That's not really border crossing that we're talking about.
Okay.
Not in this instance. All right. Well, I heard the cry of everyone, including my own, my silent one, for a 10-minute break. So we're coming up to quarter to six here in Jamaica. So 10 minutes, is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I see Ava is dying to get that break.
I think it's smooth,
Let's keep the time tight, guys.
need some fresh air. Hopefully wake up.